book Enneagram. I'm a type 1, which means we're going to start on time. And we're going to end on time.
All right.
We're holding you to that.
You can. You can. You got it. Hi. Perfect. Yeah. How are ya? Okay, wait. Let's see here. I'm giving you my notes.
Oh.
Because, maybe you want to read this. You want one for him? You're all good. Here you go. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to start chatting. Oh, there's more people in here than I was expecting. You really didn't know. I didn't know what to expect. So, nice to meet all of you. Some of you, I asked your names, and if you came in right on the nose, sorry. Maybe you can introduce yourself later. But my name is Alisha Weston, and I am a pastor on staff here at Evangel. I've been here for 7 years. I was a counselor first and a pastor second. That calling kind of came later. I actually thought I was called to be a pastor's wife, and here I am, a pastor. Technically, my husband is credentialed as well, but we're both on staff here at the church, and have gotten to work together in ministry for quite a while, which has been super fun. We have 2 little girls, 5, 4, and number 3 girl on the way. Our 4-year-old is like, Daddy, there's going to be 4 girls and only 1 boy. And so it's pretty funny. So obviously we're doing something right with the little ladies. So excited to talk to you guys about kind of a fun topic, marriage and ministry. And this is, could be a very broad topic. So we're going to talk about a couple of different things. And because I figured this group would be a little bit smaller, we're going to do a little bit of conversation as well, so you don't just have to hear me talk for the whole time. If you have questions or anything like that, please, I would prefer this be like just a conversation than just an actual. We can hear their.
I think it's coming through.
Yeah, it definitely is. Wait, hang on.
I thought we'd just get 2 for the price of 1.
Is it just on the knob there? Yeah. Can you turn it all the way down? Oh, there it is. Okay. Look at you with the tech. Okay. My husband, what he does on staff here is he's the creative director. So like all the things that I would break, that's what he is in charge of. And I do counseling and people, and he just laughs and says, I'm not empathetic enough for that. So, anyway, so we'll get started though. But I think, as I was saying, the topic, big topic, want to make sure that you guys just feel free to have open dialogue and conversation in here as well, and ask questions that you might have, so we can talk through this together. But I was at a Christian counseling conference last fall, and went to a couple of different breakout sessions that they had about marriage and ministry and different things as well. And even though I'm a counselor, I was curious what's happening today and what are they saying about marriage and ministry. And so a lot of this is like a nice culmination of things that I was learning there, as well as some other stuff that I had been taught prior. But just kind of some interesting things that's very specific to the ministry setting. So this can apply to any ministry setting. Pastors, wives, working in nonprofit, if you're just involved in ministry in any form or shape, this can apply to that, especially if you hold a pastoral title. That kind of also comes to play. So now everyone in here is operating kind of in a different capacity, and we can speak to those more specifically as well. But basically, top 2 things that pastors really struggle with today is marital issues, right? That's like one of the number 1 things, and then has to do with sexual problems. Anything that has to do with pornography and affairs. And that is not male exclusive. That is across the board, gender non-specific. So those two are our top two things for reasons that pastors struggle in ministry in general, and kind of where that ties in with their family. Complex of like a ministry context is super complex. It is not what we're typically used to seeing when it comes to any other profession. There are some things that are normal, but a lot of other things that are very complex. It's not just an occupation for people. This is definitely a way of life. People take this on as part of their identity, which is where all that enmeshment happens, right? And can cause a lot of challenges at home. But basically it's taking not only that identity, but time, right? Space in the person's life, their passions are enmeshed with what they do, and even just like their energy levels. If you are married to someone in ministry, or you yourself work in ministry, how many times is it that at the end of a work day you get home and your tank is empty? And that happens a lot. And so it's because a lot of our energy is going into that above and beyond just a normal profession. And so feels like an identity. There's a temptation often as well. There's a God's voice versus like spouse's voice that happens a lot in the home. And so sometimes we can kind of have a hard time recognizing what in our families or what is my spouse hearing that is God's voice for the church or for them in ministry, or the context of what they're doing for work, as opposed to what my voice is saying. Sometimes that can feel at odds with one another. And so that makes even this area a little bit more complex, right? There isn't just a general rule that goes with just how you're hearing things. Hi. There is also like this glass house mentality. Who feels like they fit that glass house mentality sometimes? Where you feel like oftentimes you're being watched, people are paying attention to you, what you're doing, you're good, and that kind of thing, but not, you could be going to the grocery store and you can feel like people are watching you more often than maybe they even are. It is a little bit of a mentality that people in ministry have, is that they're being often being really watched. It leads to this pressure of perfection that often a lot of us could carry in ministry, that we're supposed to be setting an example, that we're supposed to be the ones that have a higher moral standard for people to follow. We're the leaders, so people should be able to follow us. So it kind of can create that feeling that you need to be perfect all the time. Because of that, there's a loss of authenticity that happens as well. If you feel like you're trying to be perfect all the time, you can definitely feel like you're not being authentic. And so here's my story for you. I was laughing with my husband just earlier because we were having like a kid pass off. He does this, I do this, because he's also leading a breakout session that has with production. And we were laughing because I said to him, we got in a tiff before this, miscommunication regarding kid drop-off stuff. And I caught him in the hallway before we started. We laughed and said, of course, I'm going to lead the marriage and ministry, how to thrive in marriage and ministry session. And we're going to have a little bit of a tiff right before we come in. So it's kind of funny that we worked that out. But it's normal to go through things and to have things come up that need to be processed. But if we don't do that authentically and lead authentically, that is part of that complex issue that happens where we'll feel like we're having to be perfect. Because of that, we'll also have a sense of isolation oftentimes in the ministry context. You'll feel like you're often very alone, and what you're doing, you're the only one that's doing it, you're the only one that fits this context, and it's hard to find authentic friendships, and even couple friendships, you'll feel like it's harder. There's a little bit of an isolation factor, even feeling like you're not invited to as many things, which seems kind of silly, but it's real. It's a real life thing where you'll feel like, oh wow, these people got together and it would have been kind of fun to hang out with them, but at the same time, right, you carry a little bit of a weight of authority and leadership in their lives, and so it kind of can feel isolating at times. There's this expert factor, like we need to have all the answers. That again leads back into that perfectionism and glass house mentality. There is a spiritual battle, and that is a real thing that happens in any occupation, any ministry that people are doing, but it especially happens when you are equipping the saints. There's a larger impact that can happen from your obedience, and so there's definitely a spiritual battle at play. Oftentimes you have one spouse that works in ministry and one spouse that works out of the ministry, and we've experienced both of those in our family, where we've both been in ministry and at a different time when one was not in ministry. And so that can definitely create a little bit of life outside of the church. That spouse can have a life outside of the church, and there can be an expectation from the church on that spouse. Why aren't they more involved, or why aren't they attending everything, or just you can feel like there's an expectation on them as well. It's interesting, the last one I put on here, adoration of the pastor. A lot of times there is a pedestal that the pastor themselves or the minister themselves might not put themselves on that platform, but people in the church do. And the spouse sees the authentic self at home and says, they're put on this glory high pedestal in the eyes of so many people, but at the same time at home, there's not everything's as perfect as they say, so allowing space. And so sometimes spouses can feel resentful as well of why this is a show and this is real life. And so just kind of realizing, okay, there is sometimes a little bit of an adoration thing that can create disunity and some things that can happen in the marriage. So there's a lot of reasons that ministry marriages are complex. And in that, there can create a lot of reasons to why the marriages in ministry are complex too. Because if the actual work is complex, what you bring home and the boundaries that happen at home and all of that are also complex. So main reasons, does anyone, if you were to just guess like what some of the main reasons were for why people leave the ministry today, it's probably on your sheet. So you guys that have, I'm letting you cheat. Loneliness, right? Isolation, feeling alone. And then obviously this inadequate life, work, family balance. And a lot of times people will feel like they have to choose marriage or ministry when it can come to that point. If the marriage has been toxic long enough, it can become an ultimatum. You want to stay a pastor and working in the ministry, or do you want to be with me, kind of thing? And so it can kind of create that. There was a book, who has read or heard of Peter Scozio? Yes, thank you. Butchering his name. So his wife wrote a book, and she starts it out basically saying that she quit her husband's church. And the book he writes Emotionally Healthy Leader, Emotionally Healthy Spiritualities, and things like that. If you've ever heard, great resources. But it was a byproduct of his wife quitting his own church, quitting their church, and kind of giving an ultimatum almost of like, hey, this isn't what I signed up for. This isn't, I don't think, God's design. So just an interesting thing. So some things I think that we could kind of chat about, and I know not everyone's spouses are in here with you, but I wanted to talk through some of these questions about how does the expectation of ministry affect your marriages? What are some things that you notice?
I would like to say that sometimes I'm asked, Mark, my husband, he's not here, but he might ask me to do something because it's easier for him. Because it's hard always to find volunteers. And so I have to say, I will pray about it. Because I want to do what God wants me to do, not what is easiest,
Yep. That's so true. That filling those volunteer holes, and that God's
take
voice
on too much, then you
versus spouse's voice. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's, I think that's kind of, when you get into the ministry and you take on the ministry and you're married, you have your wife as your helpmate, and you tend to
delegate everything.
I was gonna say, my wife is commenting. Yeah, I'm trying to find the right words while she's in front of me, not behind me. It's just, you feel like she's your helpmate, so everything you can't handle, you kind of push on her, and then after a while you look at it and you're going, she's handling more than I am in this thing. She's got 3 kids to worry about. She's got 3 kids to worry about. She's got the women's ministry. She takes on these different things. And it's hard to find that balance, and I have a definite more appreciation for the women in the ministry now so than I did before, because I'm, well, not recently married, but I've only been married for a few years. So like looking at it as a single guy, I was like, oh, the wife is a great helpmate. She takes a burden off, and it's like when you're married and you're in the ministry, it's like, whoa, I put way too much burden on my wife. So
realizing like an unequal expectation oftentimes. I know I'll steal this from Pastor Scott since he spoke to you guys earlier. He had said something a while ago that I had heard him say that I thought was super practical, and it was that if you have your expectations are here. I wasn't in the session, so you guys, if I'm repeating him, I'm so sorry. You have expectations here, and you have reality here, and what is in the middle is called frustration. And I just thought that is brilliant, because you can have an expectation that's unspoken in your marriage. Your spouse can have that expectation on you, or vice versa. Even at home, you could have an expectation of your spouse, and if the reality is way below what is actually happening, that middle ground is frustration. So the only way to actually create common ground is to find balance between those expectations and your reality. I think that's just what wisdom right there. Yeah, there's a lot of expectations, I think, in ministry. Expectations on your spouse to help fill positions. Even expectations, I think, if as your family expands, there's expectations of the husband being home at a certain time, flexibility of schedule, where all those boundaries lie. What about, let's see, so it's expectations. What about work of the ministry?
does ministry ever really turn off?
Think about the work of ministry. So there's things that you cannot predict. There's a little bit of unpredictability that happens in ministry. Oftentimes everything seems to be an emergency. We have a lot of people that come here, and I learned this lesson a long time ago, that I have to define the emergency. Does that make sense? Or it will define me and my family. And so recognizing, okay, hang on, is this a real emergency? Was there a death? Is there an ER type of situation? Is there suicide ideation happening where someone actually needs something? If someone calls me and says, my marriage is falling apart, I need to talk to you right now. Your marriage didn't fall apart yesterday. This is building. And so that is not an emergency. And so sometimes I have this filter in my mind of your lack of planning or your lack of recognition or seeking help at a proper time is not my responsibility immediately. I will care for you and love you in due time. And I think that just shows very, very, very healthy boundaries to our church, to recognize that, we prioritize our families, and you too can prioritize your family. It allows them an opportunity to recognize that their family also matters. and not to let, have you ever heard of triangulation? Not to just let all that triangulation, people being pulled, codependency basically happening within relationships. And so if I am always available, you will always need me. If I am available when it's a real emergency, I want to bring peace and joy and comfort into that situation as best as I can. But I also want to teach people how to seek the Lord for joy and peace and comfort when they're in those seasons and struggles. And so, yeah, having that filter and allowing you and your family, and that's something that you can do. It's easy to take away with your spouse, to sit down and say, let's define an emergency. Let's define an emergency that affects our family's mealtime, that affects our Sabbath day, that affects our time together on the weekends or our day off. Let's just sit down and define that together so that as things come up, we're able to come back and say, and it's so easy to say to somebody, I love you, I value you, I'm here for you. I will be available tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Does that work for you? And most of the time it does. People can be flexible, and you take that 5 minutes, to pray and comfort in that moment. You don't completely wall off, but you do define that emergency for your family, because the more you impact, the more relationships you impact, people you impact, the more people that rely on you, the more you're going to get pulled and the more your family is going to be disrupted. So you have to be able to show that and exemplify that for your church and your own family as well. Yeah, but there is an unpredictability. Anything else about work, the actual work? Yeah.
So the opposite, Sabbath, could you just maybe talk into that a little bit more?
Yeah. So let's see. The Sabbath is, this is so funny because at church, who actually practices the Sabbath? All right.
We
Okay.
all should.
Yeah, but we all should. So what's really funny about it is it's like the one excusable thing, like do not murder, do not, and we're like, yes, don't do any of those things, don't lie, the 10 Commandments. But, having a Sabbath day and keeping it holy is a 10 Commandment. It's one of the 10. And so it's one of the things that we actually are also called to honor. There is a religious aspect to that in the Old Testament, that you pick a specific day and that's what you do. But I think also in the rhythm, it has a lot more to do with rhythm of work and rest than it does actually with a very specific day. And so that's something that you can define with your family. For us, there are seasons in ministry where the Sabbath is observed for us on a Friday, and there are other seasons where it's a Saturday. It's never been Sunday, but it's often a Friday or a Saturday, and we've defined it. If you're not intentional about what you do, life will just define you. It will just create things for you. And so it's another great area for you to have awesome discussion about what does a Sabbath look like for our family. What things do we say yes to? Who are our Sabbath people? Like, we've defined our Sabbath people, and like, who do we actually hang out with that we can be the most vulnerable with, relaxed? Who are those people? What activities are life-giving for us? Is it, and everyone's different in what that can be for your family. Some people want to hunker down and stay home. Some people want to get out and do things, and it's life-giving for them to cook. It is not life-giving for me to cook. So the Sabbath is like, we're ordering in every meal the whole day, or I'm prepping the day before. Just because I know that's not life-giving for me. I like to be able to relax, spend time with my family. So what do those activities look like? You and your family define that for you, and take a day of rest, of true relaxation, fulfillment. We try to do no screens on our Sabbath. We read a lot more. What does our family devotional time look like on the Sabbath? I pull out the kids' Bibles, and that's definitely something I want to make sure that I'm reading into them. And us as a family, not just the one who ministers is at church and the one who's home is discipling these tiny little people, and there's a disconnect. That should not happen. The Sabbath is an opportunity for family discipleship, for that to happen together, for you to have connecting time as a couple, for you to take a nap, whatever that looks like for you. Defining that and holding boundaries around it is crucial. We have that day blocked off in our calendar. It is a day that we both, if anyone wants to plan or schedule something on the Sabbath, it's a conversation of why and what it's pulling away from, and that kind of thing. And so we're very intentional, but you have to be intentional, or it's not going to just happen on its own. And revisit it. If it's feeling clunky, if it's feeling like, oh, this wasn't actually that fun, revisit it, make some changes, adjust some stuff. It's supposed to be a time for you to feel fulfilled and rejuvenated. Yeah, does that answer your question in a really long-winded way?
Well, I did give you very specific questions.
No, that's good. No, that's good. Yeah, that is it. Honestly, the Sabbath, you guys, is so healthy for your marriage. It is an opportunity to connect and be on the same page and have a weekly rhythm of reconnection that doesn't often build itself into the ministry week. So,
Can I ask you a question?
yeah.
Okay, for those people that have, I can't think of the right words, 2 or 3 jobs outside of the ministry, how do you set aside a Sabbath when you don't have the Sabbath? Like, there's no time. How do you do that?
Yeah, you prioritize and discipline what matters to you. And so I think you have to actually sit down and think, what are my values? And where is my life not in alignment with those values? And how do I create alignment? Because that's where the discipline lies. It doesn't lie in, I'm a disciplined person, and that's why I can do it. No, it lies in your values are misaligned with what you're actually doing. And so you have to sit down, make a list, what do I care about? And out here, what's not, when I filter it through this list, what's not coming out the other end and what's clogging the pipeline. And a lot of times it is our time and our energy and that kind of thing. If it's financial, make some adjustments as best as you can. Sit down, look at the budget. Where can things be alleviated to allow for this space? Yeah.
Just speaking into that too. If you feel like you can't spend a whole day to even say, this evening is our Sabbath.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Start small.
Yeah.
Yeah, practice small. Start with when we first started, we started Friday afternoons, and then we turned it into, it starts supper on Friday and goes till noon on Saturday. Let's see if we can maintain that and how tight we have to hold the reins to do that. And then it flipped into, now we have a full day. You can go ahead first, yeah.
John, just to speak to that, man. I think one of the things that's a small step that you can do as well is if you get home later, whatever the case is, and they said starting small, putting your phone on do not disturb, setting it completely down, and even just if it's a half hour before you go to bed, not even mind-numbing things like just watching TV, things like that, but being intentional about setting aside even an hour of being able to just decompress and just really rest goes a long way. And I say that because it took me being intentional about turning my phone on Do Not Disturb after 10 p.m. and then even to a place where I wasn't just doing that and then going to something else that was taking away from being intentional with either Chelsea or my kids or whatever. Usually they were in the bed at that time, but just being intentional about even a small portion of time, which then leads to when you're able to figure out and find out the other things that you can start kicking to the side that don't matter. So it's 100% even just the small things, and if there's a time at night or early in the morning, depending on your work schedule, where you can be intentionally for just about a short amount of time. Do it.
That's good, yeah. Intentional.
But I was gonna ask, do you think that for a family or for a couple, their Sabbath day should be the same day?
I would encourage it, specifically because it helps the rhythm of the family. Does it have to be? No. But I know if my husband's energy level is up here on a Saturday and mine is down here and I'm not folding clothes or making food or cleaning up or emptying the dishwasher and I'm just in my sweats on the couch and he's running around doing all these things, there's resentfulness that can just happen because there's misalignment. And so when you can be in alignment as much as possible, I would highly, highly encourage it, because the one who's not on Sabbath will be resentful of the one who is.
Yeah.
And so it's better just to have that rhythm together. Couple other just reflection things before we move on. And things that you guys can take these questions to with your spouse and process them. How many hours are you putting into your ministry? Has anyone ever clocked their time before? Good. You should. You should sit down for a week or two and actually figure out how much time you're spending. And that includes phone time, brainstorming time, looking stuff up on your computer. Because how many times in the evenings are you like, I finished all my meetings for the day, now I'm gonna start processing, now I'm gonna start downloading. Now the kids have gone to bed and we're gonna sit on the couch and I'm gonna run through everything. So I was thinking this and I was thinking this. My husband and I, because we both work here and we're both on leadership and it could just suck up our lives altogether if we wanted it to. We have like a 10-minute rule. We'll literally look at each other and be like, okay, we're done. Work is officially over. And if we take a lunch together, we'll say, is this working lunch? Or is this lunch? And even in the evening, we are very cautious of what we discuss in front of our kids at the dinner table, that we're always doing, having that conversation in good light. That is not the place for me to download the 5 crazy hard counseling sessions I had that day, or the really difficult conversation I had to have over here, or this disagreement over here, because those little ears are soaking all that stuff up. And so we even have boundaries around that, and we're pretty good about it. And to be honest, I'm probably more of the external processor talker than he is. So I've given him permission to just look at me and say, love you babe, you're done. And I'll say, okay, I get it, I'm done. Let me wrap up this one last thought. Yeah. And then I'll be done. And so that happens a lot in our home, and yeah, you have to have boundaries around that too. Brainstorming. Okay, so think about that. Take time, add it up. How long are you actually working? When there's conflict in the church, how does it affect your marriage? Think about that.
I would just say, like, for us as youth pastors, we had a ton of girls, and we're in a small town. And they would go and talk to John and be like, well, Pastor John said this, and then they'd come and talk to me and they try to play us against each other. So like, that was, I mean, it's teenage drama, obviously, but it did create a strain for a while, because it's like, what are we supposed to do? Like, I said no, and then you said yes, or vice versa, and we had to come to an agreement that we were not gonna let them come between us, because now that we've taken over, we kind of see the same thing with older women wanting to cause drama and talk about people, and we're like, this is not gonna get between us, because it did create a strain for a while.
What I was gonna say is, oddly enough, it didn't change from youth pastors to lead pastors.
Yeah.
But there's conflict. People can come in between your marriage. Yeah, play you against one another. Sometimes conflict comes home with you. You know, you've experienced something hard. and now you're bringing it home. That's a huge thing. How are you resolving conflict? What is that looking like for you? These are just reflection questions. These are just great opportunities for you guys to hash these questions out with your spouse, and do that.
I think I try to protect my wife, my kids from a lot that goes on, just because I don't want them to carry that burden and that weight. But the conflict in our marriage that usually happens is because somebody else on staff came up to my wife and said, "Oh, so what was your thought on this?" And I was like, "She didn't know." So then I'm in trouble because I didn't share those things with my spouse. I try to remind her that it's not that I'm withholding information. I just don't want them to carry that weight. I don't want them to view parishioners or even issues in the church with a skewed mind, a different eye than what they should. And so, I don't know, sometimes that can be troublesome in our marriage, but I don't know, I just try to protect them from that. And so I've had, in talking about boundaries as well, I've had to be open with those certain people and saying, please don't go too much like that, saying these things or asking these things because I don't share those things with them. That's what happened here when I go home. I don't bring that stuff there. So I don't know, it's kind of being open, communicating that as well, but I don't know, that can create conflicts.
I think there's also a discipleship lesson in there, like a gossip teaching that can be had. Because you can talk to your spouse and say, hey, I'm working through some things at work. Is it something you, I think would be beneficial for us? Are they part of the solution? Are they part of the problem? Your classic two filters. And if your wife or your spouse can be part of a solution, you can ask them, hey, I really would value your input on how to process this, if it's something you're okay being brought into. But then it's a great opportunity, like what you're saying, with some of your staff and other people, lay people too, to say, hey, that's actually gossip. We had this conversation in confidence. Not everything that we talk about in confidence, I talk to my spouse about, and that same thing goes for you. There's a confidentiality lesson, I think, that they can learn as well. So no, that's good. It's a good example. Let's see. So in here, I have for you guys, and I'm just gonna pass them along. And is ministry affecting your marriage? Little worksheet, and you guys can do this together. You can do it. I would advise you taking this to your spouse and doing it separately, and then coming together and comparing notes. I think that not often these areas, they're all about our intimacy areas, and a lot of times we think of marital intimacy in a sexual way. That is not the primary way or the only way that you have intimacy in marriage. So there's a lot of different intimacy areas that this ranks on here. So this is just a nice little, I made this up. I think it's really helpful. It's a great check and just a thing for you guys continue to come back to. So the areas on here basically is 1 being very unsatisfied to 8 being very satisfied in these areas of intimacy. So 1 is conversational intimacy. Do you feel like you're actually able to connect through conflict resolution, through just being open with one another emotionally? So conversational intimacy. The other is physical intimacy, so initial affection all the way to intercourse and everything in between. That's for you guys to determine together and talk about. Recreational intimacy. Do you actually have fun? Is life all about work? Do you have any hobbies together? Do you play together? What does life look like for you just in marriage? Are you recreationally fun? Do you do things together? If you are a parent of young children, you'll probably rank low on that for a while. And that's okay. Your fun consists of making forts and going to the water park. So, or the park. Spiritual intimacy. This is notoriously low in ministry marriages. How sad is it that this is by far almost always ranked the lowest? We tend to separate our spiritual intimacy in ministry because we do it when we have time. We do things that one gets to read their Bible in their office while one reads their Bible while nursing. Or one, it just looks so different depending on if there's an imbalance in who's actually working in ministry and who's home, or if you're both in ministry. One might have a job that's very ministry focused, and one might not. Like, I'm the pastor, my husband does creative stuff, so he's always doing production and lights and camera and all that crazy stuff. And so I might have space to read my Bible, or be able to build that into my calendar where he doesn't have the luxury of doing that as easily. And so, but this is notoriously low. Do you share your walk with God together? Do you do devotions? Do you ever read a book? Do you pray together outside of putting the kids to bed and outside of before meals? At night, do you spend that time together? Do you go to bed at the same time and actually pray together? What does that look like for you? We're constantly adjusting this. I am a morning person. My husband is a night person, and so we always are having to adjust based on kids' seasons of when this works best for us to connect in this way. Do you ever get to actually go to church together? That's a hard one, because often one of you is unavailable, right? You've heard the message already at home, or that kind of thing. And so thinking about that, is there ever times or weekends where you allow someone else to take a platform and you and your spouse go on vacation and you do church together on your own, the two of you? Spiritual intimacy, partnership intimacy, walking side by side. Where are you operating in tandem as a team? And are you always dividing and conquering? Do you ever feel like you have teamwork in anything? In parenting, does that feel imbalanced? In home projects, in whatever, working on your calendar, who's dictating the boundaries in the home, that kind of thing. So where is their teamwork lacking? Where is this at? So anyway, super simple, just thing for you guys to just look at and work through together. So I like this kind of, once you hash this out, there's like a path to wholeness or a direction that you can take. And you can be really overwhelmed by these numbers at first and think, wow, we're suffering more than we thought, or we have a couple areas that are pretty low. I always just encourage people, pick one that you think you can move from a 2 to a 3, or from a 1 to a 2, or that kind of thing. Just pick one you're going to focus on for a season and kind of tackle that. Ask questions about, is this something that we can schedule? Is this something that we can create actual time for and intentionality around? Also prioritizing your marriage. So that's kind of the easy thing that I think on the back I have some little points for you. But prioritizing your marriage. God's original design, right, is that you actually put your marriage first. Oftentimes we think that it's the work of the ministry that comes first, and we don't actually think that, but we operate that way a lot of times. And so where is that imbalance that you haven't put your marriage first? Utilize this as an opportunity to actually make a SMART goal. If you know what SMART goals are, they're specific, they're measurable, achievable, relevant, time sensitive. Google it if you don't know, but make a goal that's actually SMART, that actually you can work towards and see if you're winning in that area. Boundaries. I could talk about boundaries for a whole hour, I think. But boundaries in marriage is huge. Henry Cloud wrote a book on it. It's a great resource if you're actually needing help defining boundaries for you. But set some boundaries for your family. Do you guys have a boundary around sacred spaces? Like, is dinner a sacred space? Is that an area that we do dinner? And obviously ministry is kind of crazy and we always have evening things. And so pick a couple nights of the week that are off weeks or off nights and put a boundary around that there's boundaries around the dinner table. Is bedtime a boundary? Some couples like to go to bed at the same time, increases their physical intimacy. So if that happens for them, put a boundary around it. What does that look like for you? I mentioned this earlier, but a boundary to not talk about ministry. What does that look like? What is that boundary? If it's everyone works a job where they come home and they want to debrief, that's no surprise. So when does the debrief stop? What does that look like? Is it the 5 minutes while the kids are playing before you have a meal together, or before meal prep happens, or whatever? Is after the kids go to bed and you just stay quiet the whole rest of the time before? What is the boundary for talking about ministry? What verbiage do you use with one another to know to stop, to correct, course correct, and kind of recognize that the boundaries are getting violated? Where are you not taking control of your schedule? That's really hard too. I think a lot of times we just let our calendar rule us, and so it's vital. I know it's very important for me to regularly, every quarter, I sit down and create an ideal work week for myself and an ideal schedule. And because life happens and because things change and seasons change, you'll veer from that automatically. So create a rhythm where you're revisiting that ideal week or that ideal family time and what that looks like, and continually revisit it. Take some control over that. So think about this for a second. Here's my example for you guys. So imagine in ministry that you've just told one of your leaders that you're not going to be attending a certain meeting. Okay, so picture this. How does it feel? Do you feel bad at all? Do you feel like you're losing responsibility? Pay attention to the emotion that's behind that, because that says something for you. Put yourself in some imaginary scenarios so when it actually comes up, you can anticipate those emotions. Recognizing, are the feelings bad? If they're negative emotions, why are they negative? Is it a feeling of guilt? Is it a feeling of fear? Is it a feeling of loss of control? What is behind the emotion? And actually taking some time to ask yourself, the counselor in me would say, when was the first time you felt that in life? When was the first time you had to say no to a situation like that? When was the first time you tried to uphold a boundary? What happened? And a lot of times it's something that happened in our past where we've been given X amount of responsibility and fallen through, and now we compensate for that, right? So pay attention to that in your calendar. Think through some random examples of how that affects you. Shifting your mindset towards one another is number 4. That one's huge. I think that God has given every single one of you a gift, not just the one working in ministry. Each and every one of you are gifted. Each and every one of you have a fruit of the Spirit that the Lord wants to exemplify through you and wants to use you as a conduit for His glory, right? Each one of you. What is that gifting? Does that make sense? And then take the time to actually think through and celebrate each other's opportunities to operate in the gifting that you have. Oftentimes we don't do that enough. We don't celebrate the other person for the gifting that God has given them and how they get to operate in it. And be respectful of that gifting. One is not more important than the other, or even I'd argue more influential than the other. So share that appreciation together. I also say, like, this is kind of funny and practical, but how often do we do pastor appreciation in church? This is I was like the wrench that kept getting thrown into stuff because I'm a female pastor and get stuck with all the boys and all these things. And I remember when we started doing pastor appreciation, I was like, you guys, I am the pastor, and I am also my own pastor's wife. So I'm done with everybody, just the pastors, all of us celebrating each other, because I'm writing all of you thank you cards for these beautiful things that your wives are giving me and putting this weird obligation on myself to do the same. And so just recognizing, like, where's our imbalance happening even in pastor appreciation? Where are the husbands getting elevated, but the pastor getting elevated, but the family isn't getting recognized? Not at all. And so any pastor appreciation gift that my family feels like the Lord is asking us to give is a family appreciation gift. It is a gift for the family. It is a family sacrifice to be in ministry. Those kids are getting something. The spouse is getting something. And so use that as a platform even in your church, if you guys celebrate that, to celebrate family and the sacrifice it takes for all of you to do that. Discover joint calling. What are you both called to? What does that look like? And that kind of thing. So very, very, very important. Think about how each of you are operating in your calling, even outside of a pulpit. You could have a calling for organization, and you you have an organization business, and you go into a grieving widow's home and you help her go through her loved one's items. That is a gift. And that is not a pulpit gift, right? A teaching gift. It is different and outside of the ministry, but it's ministry in and of its own right. So we have some time though to talk through some questions. I did put some reflection questions on the end for you guys, again, to just kind of refer to. But if anyone has questions, thoughts, anything like that, super broad, tried to give some practicals, hoping it's helpful. You did a great job asking questions throughout the whole thing, so that's good too.
I guess I have a little something that I wanted to share.
Yeah.
I know that couple there talked about somebody coming to her and then to him, and you know, I think it starts with children. They do that a lot, you know, because growing up, that was when we got married. That was the biggest thing that we had disagreed on, because I would say no and he would say yes. So they know who to ask first, you know. So it wasn't a very good thing. So we figured it out that they were doing that, and then so we come together and worked out something. Hey, let's just say no, and just, or you know, we just worked it out where we didn't have that conflict anymore. So yeah, it starts with the children too.
Kids are very smart.
Yeah,
Yes.
They know how
it's
to figure
true.
out how to get it right.
It's true.
Yeah.
We don't have to feel obligated to answer any question immediately. I think my favorite response is always, you know, let me take some time to think about it, or I'm gonna process that one and I'll get back to you. Because it's just way easier. You can, oftentimes then you can let the emotional response pass, like the people-pleasing response, or whatever that emotional response is. You can let it kind of come and go like a wave, and then think through, get your discernment on board, and, you know, answer that way. But no, that's so true. It's good.
And I think the biggest thing is communication, because I stay home, but I teach Sundays, you know, the kids, 2 churches we pastor. So
my husband's a quiet type, that if anybody says anything, he's quiet, but then I'm the one that tries to bring everything out of him when he's home, like what happened, what to say, and stuff like that. So this way, and sometimes he doesn't remember, but it's just the thought of him sharing. It's just a matter of him sharing a little bit of what, you know, if something happened that I know it's bothering him, because we've been married for 46 years now, so we kind of know each other, you know, what's bothering you. And then he would communicate with me, and then we'd talk about it and pray together, you know, so it's just, yeah, communication.
Huge. Yeah, one last thing too, when you're on the communication thing, is I always tell couples, in ministry or otherwise, that conflict, healthy conflict, it leads to a depth of intimacy. So don't ever be afraid of conflict, because you can often feel like it's pretty disruptive. But what it does is it allows you to see more of the other person and recognize they're different from you. And it creates a depth of understanding and intimacy once resolved. And so leaning into that in a healthy way is very, very, very important in a marriage. Don't shy away from conflict.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I said I'd be done on time, so I want to stay true to my word. And yeah, let me just pray for you guys really quick. Lord, we just thank you for each marriage that is represented in this room. God, we know that this is your design, and Father, that you give us each of the tools and the wisdom and discernment to just be what it is that you want each and every one of our marriages to be, which is a representation of you and your love for your church. And so, Father, I just pray that each marriage represented in this room is an example of your love for the churches that they lead, the churches that they impact, and that they see how much the Father loves them through how much they love one another and the unity that they have in their home. We pray that you bless them and the rest of their time at this conference. In your name, amen.
Amen.
Awesome. Thank
You
you.
guys, let's give Alisha a hand. Well, on your schedules, your next breakout session starts at 4:15, so you've got a few minutes of downtime to grab some coffee. And be sure to thank Alisha for her awesome presentation today. And
Thank you.
it was awesome. So
Yeah, thanks guys for coming. You don't know what to expect.
Yeah.